I had a friend that used to always say this: "Well, niche will get you rich," right? So focusing on the niches and those markets, if you can go deep in an area.
Whilst we obviously have a lot of transition and transformation now through AI, it still is a people's business. So I think that's the constant.
It's really about where the business opportunity is, where you see it going, and then being able to show and explain why you're going to be best to serve that market.
Marcus Sawyer. Welcome you to AI and Recruiting, the show where they break down how AI is transforming hiring, leadership, and the future of work. Expect real talk, smart tools, and bold conversations with the people shaping what's next. Let's get into it.
Thomas, welcome to the AI in Recruiting podcast. How you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, always good to have a conversation with you. I mean, it's funny because we seem to bump into each other all around the world. And now you're in London right now, right?
Correct.
Yeah, and we've had some history with Adecco. Now to you, obviously, you've been running your own firm and we're running EQ. So really excited to have the conversation around one of the things all my customers are asking is how do they value their staff and recruiting business?
Yeah, it's an
Yeah.
interesting topic.
Yeah, and so just for those that may not know Thomas, I'll kind of give a little bit of an overview of how we connected. So in the M&A world, when we were doing digital transformation at Adecco, Thomas was a key part of that. And more recently, in the last few years, there's been a lot more conversations around valuations, not only because of technology, but because there's a lot of movement and consolidation in the market, and our customers at EQ and those who are listening know are generally staff and recruiting firms and CEOs and board members who are trying to figure out how do they increase the market value and enterprise value of their firm. So I thought there was no better person than you to have this discussion with.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah. So why don't you tell the audience that's listening in a little bit about your background and how
Sure.
you got into this space?
So I started my career in bulge bracket investment banking at a firm which at the time was called CS First Boston. In my first few days there, I saw the closing bits of the merger between Adecco and Adecco, coincidentally. So
Wow.
this goes back to the mid-90s. And I worked on the Swiss desk at what was then First Boston, and Adecco. We were the house bank for Adecco, so I worked a bit on a few Adecco things. Fast forward to 2002, together with my partner Ronnie, we started Blackwood Capital Group, originally as a sector agnostic M&A advisory firm. In 2005, we then started working again with Adecco through some of the old relationships that I maintained. And in the first 3-4 years, we completed about 9 or 10 transactions, both buy side, sell side, across Europe, North America, Asia. And that really propelled us into focusing more on the human capital services space. And since the mid 2010s, we started doing a lot with SIA, first in Europe, then in the US, then with talent. So we've been on the circus for staffing and recruiting. And yeah, that's how we got into that. So today we work both buy side, sell side across various continents with large public listed firms, private equity owned firms, private equity firms directly, as well as entrepreneurs.
Amazing. And one of the things that you do, which I find really interesting, and I'm an avid reader of, is that you have the staff and the recruitment valuation M&A update every month, which we'll go through shortly. And I think that gives people a good view on one sheet of what's going on in the market and how you value your business. The question that I have, so you mentioned Adecco and Echo, and we had a part of that business relaunched when I was there, which was Adia for the digital services. So shout out
Yeah.
to Ernesto if you're listening in, because you were driving that within our group. That Adecco and Echo, that was in the 90s.
Yeah.
We're now in 2026. And one of the things that I've found with anybody that I speak in business who's been around for a while, there are some things that change, but there are some fundamentals, principles that remain the same. What is the same from the 90s in staffing and recruiting versus 2026? And then we'll get into all the differences because there's a lot of differences right now.
There are a lot of differences. I think the same is it's a people's business. It's
Mm,
about your internal team. It's about the external team. It's about customers. And I think, and there are some interesting tech-led examples where that may have gotten lost a little bit. Any even technology firm wanting to enter the staffing market and be a player within the staffing recruiting market need to understand that whilst we obviously have a lot of transition and transformation now through AI, it still is a people's business. So I think
yeah,
that's the constant.
yeah.
I think the new and the changing bit is really the evolution is all about delivery of the service, and that is obviously magnified now with AI and the speed of transformation.
One of the things I've been thinking about a lot as far as how a staffing business is structured, because there's many abstract parts to this, and so you have to look at it in my view like a shop almost, right? So you've got the front office, as we call it, and I think my opinion, and I'd love your perspective, is I think that's going to continue to be people led and people driven. And that's going to be a premium service, and then you've got the middle and the back office, which is all the stuff that happens behind the scenes. And we can maybe take Amazon as an example in their warehouses. Who knows what's going on in there right now? And that's where there's a lot of opportunity to automate. What are you seeing kind of in the differences between the front, the middle, and the back offices within staffing firms and how they're structured and how that impacts their
Yeah.
valuations?
I think there's a very direct correlation, I think, between how staffing firms or workforce solution firms generally are structured. We're seeing premium valuations in companies that have over the years managed to automate and digitize a lot of their processes. AI, I think, is an additional layer which might also catapult the front office into different processes and responsibilities. But for now, clearly the focus has been on simplifying not only the overhead structure in terms of number of people, but also just generally the processes and delivery of the back office functions.
Yeah,
And the way this translates into valuation is if you look at companies, irrespective of what their gross margin is, but once you look at gross margin or NFI, how that translates into EBITDA, that correlation, that is really the reflection of how efficient your back office operates. Uh,
sure.
and we see companies, in the old-fashioned world, converting 10, 12, 15, 20%, whereas we see companies that have a high level of automation converting at 30, 40, 50 plus percent.
That's a big difference in terms of the value. And I think that's one of the things that is underestimated within the staffing and recruiting space around the operational efficiency and effectiveness that is so important to increase the value and, for want of a better term, running lean in the places where you need to run lean, and then expanding in the areas that you need to on the front office side.
Yeah.
One of the things that so going on to the valuation update, and I was looking at it this month. Are you seeing any trends from last month to this month that are standing out? Because I'm looking at this month now. One of the things that stuck out to me, which I actually think is a little bit hidden, is what Recruit Holdings actually does. as a business, and I know it well from my world, but I think people will be quite surprised to the companies that they own and why their EV to revenue is 22x, right, versus the other. That was one thing that stood out. But I'd love your view on kind of what you're seeing in the market
Yeah.
and where the evolution's happening.
I mean, I think recruit is probably the biggest abnormality in the staffing world in terms of valuation, and I think that is because it's got two massive sides to it. Both a pure digital offering through Indeed, so it's a
Mhm.
marketplace which tends to have higher valuations in itself, as well as then the traditional staffing business. Plus, it's got a humongous size, and then it's got a lot of other businesses that it's got its feet in. So I think recruit is difficult to compare to the rest of the market, and I wouldn't take that as a guide. But it clearly is a very well managed operation.
Do they still own Glassdoor as well? Is that still part of their
I,
portfolio?
I
Yeah.
believe so. I'm not 100% sure, but I think so. Yes.
Yeah, and look, it reminds me of kind of these bolt-ons that a lot of the digital transformations were really meant to drive forward, and having these speedboats, if you like, that could support the main vessel and the main tanker. I mean, one of the other things that I noticed as well from the report, and I see it, is that, uh, I had a friend that used to always say this: "Well, niche will get you rich," right? So, focusing on the niches and those markets, if you can go deep in an area, maybe touch a little bit upon that and kind of the types
Yeah.
of
I
niches that you're seeing.
mean, I think if we want to talk generally, there are two things that drive valuations: size, size matters, and specialization. Right.
Okay.
So specialization being niche. So if you're focused on higher margin offerings, services, whether that's IT, life sciences, or more HR consulting. SOW is obviously now quite trendy, and there's a lot of movement also on the client side towards looking more at SOW type work. That typically will command a premium, whereas the commoditized, lower margin, general staffing is the one that suffers. Having said that, with AI entering the market, there are I've heard quite a few staffing executives suggest that they feel their business is more defensive and stable
Mhm.
because things can't just be replaced that easily. So I think there's a give and take. We've generally seen always a valuation premium in the US versus Europe. Um, Although, especially now in the February update, we've seen that reversed a little bit most recently. But I think generally the US market commands a premium because of the size, because of the margins, because of the fragmentation, the natural growth that the US market typically has versus the European markets.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that is underestimated is economies of scale, operating leverage as well. Once you hit a certain size, and maybe there is an opportunity there for that compounding impact to take place with AI.
Without a doubt. Without a
Yeah,
doubt.
yeah, and one of the things that comes onto my desk quite a lot. So we work with staff and recruiting firms, helping them with AI transformation. Is, hey, if I make this type of move, will that increase the valuation of my company, or what impact will that have? Now, it's it's a question that comes up a lot, and I think you've talked about the fundamentals, right? The specialization, size, operating. What are you hearing or seeing in the market from the other side? Because I think the sellers don't really understand the buyers, and that's where you come in. So
So I
yeah, what are
think
the misconceptions?
so. The first misconception is, and I tell clients on the sell side always, you do not change your business model for a buyer, because
Mm,
every buyer will have a very different view on what they want. You need to do what you think is right for the business. If you think you need a better CRM system, because you're not on top of your business, then that's what you have to do. If you think you need to, we have a common friend, Federico Vione.
Yeah.
We were working, once he had joined W Group, we were working on an acquisition in France. And I asked him, what is the difference for you as a strategic investor buying a business, whether you pay 10 million more or less in purchase price? We're talking on a deal where the 10 million would have been less than 10%.
Sure.
For financial investors, it's different. Financial investors get in and they need to get out and they need to make a return, and the dynamics are slightly different. But from a strategic investor perspective, I asked him, if you want to strategically buy that company because it gives you access to a market or access to a vertical, does it make that much of a difference if you pay 7-8% more in purchase price? And he said, do you know how many branches I open with 10 million euros? I'm going to add 30% to my core business overnight. That is his answer as a buyer who has a specific business philosophy.
Yeah.
So there isn't an answer of what do the buyers want to see. What the buyers want to see is a well-functioning company, a company that grows, that has efficient processes, that has a balanced portfolio of clients, services, and not and so you can't pivot your business model towards what you think a buyer might think.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I think it's similar in the startup world as well, right? So the space that I now find myself in, where people are pandering to maybe what the investors think, because you want to get that Series A or Series B. But I think at the start, it's really about where the business opportunity is, where you see it going, and then being able to show and explain why you're going to be best to serve that market. And you talked about people, and I know that in stuff, and that's everything, right? So it's colleagues, clients, and candidates. How do you think that that is evolving in terms of when somebody looks at a deal and they look at a company and they look at the management team, but then they look at the clients and they look at the candidates, where is the value? Where's the value placed typically? And we'll talk generally, and I know we have to go specific to go into each niche, because we'll talk about supply and demand. But yeah, how much weight is put on the team versus the clients?
I think the team is clearly the most. At the end of the day, private equity back people, right?
Yeah.
And strategic investors mostly also back people, especially if it's a people's business, right?
Yeah.
So in my mind, unless we're now working on a smaller deal where there is a very specific high quality client profile or client relationships that can be acquired. So I think in that case, that might be the driver, but I would say generally it is management and the people.
I think that the people who are obviously interfacing with the buyers, right? They make a big difference in terms of the impression, um, how they leave that impression on the buyers, what that impression would be on their customers, because it's a true reflection. And one of the things that I've been talking to companies about at the moment has really been, how do you get value? How do you get, I suppose, buyer ready, right? And to your point, it's like you don't get ready for the buyers, you get ready for the business, and then if you're ready for the business,
Yeah.
then the buyers will come.
Yes, you get buyer ready by preparing well for a process, right? So buyer ready means not changing your business model or changing processes for the sake of a process, for the sake of selling. Buyer ready means understanding your numbers, having projections ready, having done some diligence, making sure that you don't have any skeletons in the closet or similar.
Sure.
If you have had any difficulties, that you've addressed them, mitigated them, that is how you get buyer ready.
Yeah. And if you were talking to a prospective seller, as far as the time horizon where they need to think about becoming buyer ready, like what is typically a time horizon, and what are the maybe 2 or 3 things that you see all the time that they must do?
So I think we obviously we like to get in as early as possible, because the earlier we're in, the easier it is to prepare. We typically assume a 2-month preparation phase. Sometimes there are certain restructuring measures and things like that that you need to do or you want to do, so that might take longer. There's no need for an M&A advisor to be part of that, but obviously from our perspective, it's helpful if we're already involved. Um, yeah, from the time, if you count backwards, that you want to go to market, I would say at least 2 months, 3 months before
Yeah.
that.
And so does that differ depending on location at all? Because you've done a lot of international business, and that's why I think it's really interesting for the US market to hear, because you've got buyers all over the world and sellers all over the world. What are some of the nuances or differences that you're seeing in terms of the transactions and how they take to go through?
I mean, I think the US, and to a certain extent Europe, but I think the US mentality wise is always open for business. So I think people are a bit more pragmatic. In Europe, um,
No
people
deals in
tend to
August
be a
in
little
Europe.
bit more reserved,
Yeah.
less open to sharing. And then we've done deals in the Middle East, we've done deals in Asia. So there is a certain expectation on speed, but then on the reality of the environment you're in.
Yeah.
Ultimately, selling a business as an entrepreneur is a very different ballgame from running the business. And, some things may seem or may look like common sense, but unless you've been through it, it's something you don't know, right? So,
Yeah.
a lot of it is education.
Interesting. Okay, well, I'm gonna switch gears slightly just onto the technology side,
So,
because I can't help but notice that there are also HR tech platforms in your report. And I think one of the big questions that we touched on a little bit is, how does technology impact my valuation, if at all, right? And you'd also mentioned, we talked a little bit about some of the anomaly business models. So when I look at a recruit and I look at Indeed, I think about data versus people always, right? I think about how much information do you have, because they're selling data and they're data brokers across the board, but also technology itself, the processing of people, the speed in which that happens. What are you seeing, or have you heard, that's having an impact on the valuation, whether it's positive or negative, when it comes to technology itself?
so I think maybe a first example is we were working with a private equity firm on a potential transaction. And they looked at a business and decided not to pursue it because they didn't feel that management were up for the AI revolution that is happening.
Wow.
So I think there is first a layer where, and a lot of especially private equity firms are looking twice now at the sector. Is this a sector that will survive? How will it survive? Who will survive in it? Given the level of automation that is coming, not only to back office, but to front office with AI agents.
Yeah.
And so I think the first stress test seems to be, does the team running the business have an understanding for what the future holds? Not a glass bowl and knowing exactly, but do they have an understanding for what you need to do to your business model to stay competitive, to deliver service in a more efficient way, to be at the forefront of this transformation rather than a follower. So I think that's probably the first stress test. Once and then if and when you are convinced that you believe in the sector and you believe in what's happening, I think then it's just a pure question of, are you buying a company that is already at a stage from which to grow? Are you buying a company where you see the potential? I think overall technology is important. It's an enabler, and that's how it's being valued.
Sure.
Pure technology businesses, of course, are valued completely differently, right? So I think we are talking to a different set of buyers with different valuation norms if you look at technology businesses. So, but technology, as in the example we said earlier, it makes operations more efficient, therefore increases profitability, therefore drives valuation.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that is how it impacts relative valuations of companies.
Yeah, it goes back to, I think, what we're talking about as far as who the buyers are and what their idea is
Yeah.
of the future as well, because there's also many reasons why people buy. From at least my understanding, it's like, is it a bolt-on? Is it a
Exactly.
platform deal? Are we using it to go into a new market? So you must assess that during the discovery phase with the buyers. And if you were to say kind of like what you're seeing this year, what types of reasons are company buying for? Like, why are they buying staffing firms?
I think the reasons are, I don't think they've changed dramatically. There are some that really are looking for specific verticals, geographies. Others are increasing. Well, I would say over the last 20 years, technology has played an increasingly um, important role in, if we look at a pie chart of what are the reasons for doing a deal, right?
Yeah.
Um, People buy technology businesses to gain the technology or to gain the team, to gain the understanding. And there is a fair amount of those still out there, but there is equally a fair amount of market share, skills, uh, geographies, etc., etc.
And do you see, obviously, I know this is your world, and we hope there's more activity, but do you feel like there's going to be more activity this year than last year?
There certainly is more interest. There certainly are more deals around. Whether they will close and how quickly they will close, that is, I think, that's still to be seen. But for us, Q4 of last year, we started working on 6 to 8 new deals that have moved into this year, whereas 12 months earlier we had maybe 2 or 3 new deals. So I think there's definitely a significant uptick in activity. Now the question is, and obviously we hope that translates into deals being done.
Well, Thomas, I could talk to you all day and ask you a ton of questions, because I find this topic fascinating, and speaking to somebody that's been in and around it for so long and understands it has been great. Is there anything that you want to leave any of the buyers or sellers with that you think's worth knowing before we decide to conclude today?
But well, for sellers or for entrepreneurs, make sure you've got good advice. Make sure you've got advisors on board. Don't start talking to potential buyers without being prepared. M&A is not rocket science. It's common sense. But you can get lost a little bit in the nuances, and if it's not your day-to-day bread and butter business, then you might a seller selling a company is the same as selling a house. There's one buyer that will like this house much more and will be willing to pay more for it, and another who looks at the house and isn't even going to walk into it.
Yeah.
And it's the same with companies, right? And don't take it personally if people don't like your company. It doesn't mean that you don't have a good company. But if you have the right advisor, you're hopefully going to get those people into the house that will like it.
That's a really, really smart way to look at it. And I think that it's undervalued that we forget that a company is something that people have to buy and have to like and have to desire and want and need. So, Thomas, I think what I'd like to say, whether it's you or anybody bumps into Ronnie as well, if you need advice on whether you're buying or selling, Blackwood Capital is the place to go. I've really enjoyed the discussion. I'll also give a shameless plug for EQ as well. If you're thinking about AI transformation and it's something that's on the agenda, but you're not sure how to do it and also what's real and what's not, feel free to reach out. Happy to have the conversation. And also, if you've got value from this conversation, let us know, because we'll continue doing these. Thomas and I are not strangers. And there's a lot more that we could talk about when it comes to the areas in the markets, but we're only going to give the staffing leaders, buyers and sellers what they need and want. So feel free to reach out. Thomas, where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
Blackwoodcapital.com, on LinkedIn.
Okay. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure as always. And thank you for sharing your wisdom, knowledge and time. And most people would have to pay for this advice. And right now you got a freebie. And so, yeah, again, Thomas, absolute pleasure and looking forward to continuing discussions.
Thanks for having me.
If you got value from today's episode, share it with someone in your network, your team, your boss, or that recruiter still stuck in 2015. Be sure to follow the show so you never miss what's next in hiring and AI. Until next time.